It's been a little over 1 month since the tragic building collapse in Surfside just up the street from me. Today is July 29th and the collapse happened on June 24th. So it's been just a little over a month, and I've been telling people I was going to make this video because everybody wants to know what's going to happen to the real estate market here, specifically the condo market really in Surfside and Miami Beach we're going to be looking at in this video, because these are the markets that are really going to be affected by this collapse, if at all. So today we're going to dive into exactly what has been happening in the local real estate market here now that it's been 1 month after the collapse. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at the last 6 months worth of closed sales in Surfside in Miami Beach, and we're going to be looking only at condos. We're going to be excluding single family homes here since they're not really affected by this from the point of view that, you know, people aren't going to be scared to leave their house. It's more about the condos, right? So we're leaving houses out of this. We're focusing only on condos, and we're focusing on Surfside and Miami Beach because Miami Beach is right next door and the communities are basically one. It's separated by one street, and the reality is, guys, we have a lot of old buildings in Surfside and in Miami Beach, so we're both going to be affected by this, if at all. So let's take a look at the past 6 months of closed sales in the area, and we'll take a look at things like how many units have sold and also the average selling price and things like that. I'll share my computer screen with you here so you can take a look at it with me. What you're looking at here are just some screenshots I took from my MLS looking at the past 6 months of closed condo sales in Miami Beach and Surfside. And so what we're looking at are just a bunch of averages. So what you see here, and we had 300 closed sales from June 24th to July 25th. Okay, so this is after the collapse that there was 300 closed sales, and you can see that the average selling price during this time was $852,000 and the median was $410, and this also shows the minimum and the maximum. This number right here obviously isn't right. No condos sell for $392. Some realtor made some kind of mistake putting in the data in the MLS. But the maximum was $8,750,000, which is not too surprising for this area. We got 300 closed sales in the last month in Miami Beach and in Surfside, okay? And then when we go down to the month right before the collapse, we're looking at from May 24th all the way up to the same day of the collapse, we have 411. So right away, when I saw this, my first thought was, wow, okay, so it did have a little bit of an impact on the market. But this is why it's very important to look back in history and dig further back than just the previous month's worth of sales, because real estate is not a static industry, guys. Things fluctuate. It's normal to have a different amount of closed sales from month to month, even from year to year. But that's why we look at history to see, are things really being impacted here, or are they not? So that's the whole point of this video, so let's dig into it further. When we go back to the time period between the end of April and the end of May, we have 392 closed sales. And one thing I did notice here is that the average selling price for these two previous months before the collapse were significantly higher. We got 1.2 million and a little over 1 million, and then, you know, right after the collapse was 852,000. So a lot of people might also look at that as an alarm bell, like, wow, that's a $300,000 difference. But let's keep going back to see if that stays consistent. One thing I'm seeing for sure here that's consistent is the amount of closed sales. So again, we have 412 closed sales from the end of March to the end of April. Average selling price, 1.3 million. Okay. And then we have 345, so that's a little bit lower, you know, kind of in the middle from the end of February until the end of March, and another $1.3 million average closed sale price. And then this is kind of a tricky time of year because here we're looking at the end of January through the end of February. And I would say sales are typically lower this time of year anyhow, because, you know, we just had the holidays and people spent a ton of money during the holidays for travel and gifts and all kinds of things. People are out of town, so there's just less closings taking place in general. So you can see this number is even lower. We had 241 closed sales in the area from the end of January through the end of February, which is even lower than the numbers that we had after the collapse. The one thing I'm seeing here that we're going to have to pay attention to moving forward is maybe not so much the amount of closed sales. Obviously, we'll look at that too. But the main thing I want to pay attention to as well is the average selling price, because look at that, almost 1.4 million. So right away, right off the bat, that's the number one thing that seems to have gone down even more significantly than the amount of sales, right, is the average selling price. However, we don't know yet if it's because the building collapsed and people got scared and they wanted to lowball, all the future deals going forward. Like, well, if I'm going to buy it, then we're going to offer you significantly less. It's just too soon to tell. But this is an indicator of something that we want to pay attention to see if this is a trend moving forward, because this is kind of what I predicted in a previous video. My train of thought was, if it's going to end up being a lot more expensive to own one of these condos, then in turn the price of them should come down because the monthly cost of ownership is going to go up. So this right here seems to support my theory, but it's still too soon to know that. Now, if you are still planning on buying a property down here in Florida, or you have a property to sell, I do offer real estate services down here, and we cover the entire state of Florida. So feel free to give my team a call. All the info is down in the description below. Now, one other thing we can take a look at here, which isn't really going to be a significant thing, but it's just something to pay attention to as well. I like to check all different types of sources and data just to try to get the clearest picture of what's happening, okay? Surfside prices according to Zillow.com. You can see as of late, the prices have still been rising, but that's only as of June, it seems like. So even their data hasn't caught up yet with the most recent sales, and that's why I have been showing you here my exclusive data from the Miami MLS, because this is updated by the minute, guys. And I wanted to wait at least a month to see what kind of closed sales we had, and now that we have that information, I'm making this video. So far, Zillow isn't really any help, but we'll pay attention to this too, looking forward in the future, and see if this kind of indicator changes. And this is specific to Surfside, okay? So we're not even looking at Miami Beach. You see prices were dipping between 2018 and 2019, and then started going back up after the pandemic started, which has been pretty much the case for all of Florida and a lot of other places in the country. Now let's look at another thing that I was curious about, because I've seen a lot of people say in the comments and even some things on the news talking about how anybody now who buys a condo that was built after the year 2000 is absolutely insane, because the building codes got stricter after that because of Hurricane Andrew in '92. So I was curious to know, well, how many of these 300 or so closed sales that have closed since the collapse, how many of those were in older buildings versus new buildings? Well, luckily, I'm a real estate agent and I have access to that information here for you. So I have a spreadsheet here of all of the condo closed sales that were happening since the collapse from June 25th all the way up until July 28th or 29th, I want to say. What I did is we have this spreadsheet here, and I sorted all of these closed sales by the year built. Okay, so this is where it's going to get really interesting, because there's 300 closed sales roughly, right? So let's just look down the list here. 2008, 2004, lots of newer buildings here. Here's where we draw the line, right? The year 2000. So this is number 88 on the list. So that means we still have over 200 closed sales in buildings that are older than the year 2000. Well, I guess a lot of these people must be crazy, right? That's what the news says, or everybody else says, because they must be right if everybody says they're nuts to buy something older than 2000. My personal opinion on this, guys, this is just my opinion, is that it's not so much about the age of the building, rather how well the building has been maintained over the years, because there's buildings that were built here in like 1955 that still look brand new because they really maintain it, and there's other ones that were built in the 90s that are falling apart. So it really doesn't matter. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, because it does matter. Obviously, materials wear out over the years, but the level of maintenance that goes into these places makes a gigantic difference in the overall integrity of the building. And you can see, looking down the list here, a lot of these buildings, guys, a lot of them close that are all built way earlier. You see, we have a lot of old buildings here in Miami. These are all the 60s already. We had the 70s, 80s, you know. Look at that. We're down in the 50s, the 40s now, the 30s, even down to the 20s, okay? And this is the majority of the closed sales. More than 2/3 of the closed sales, condos, that took place just in Miami Beach and Surfside were built before the year 2000. So what does this mean? It clearly means that people are still buying real estate down here despite the collapse, which is something I thought was going to happen anyhow. And it means that people aren't scared to buy in older buildings like a lot of people thought was going to happen as well. Now, it has only been 1 month, and we are going to pay attention to this trend moving forward. I think I'll wait after it's been like maybe 3 months or 4 months to get a little bit of a bigger picture of what's going on with this. But we'll definitely follow up on this in a couple months in the future and see what's going on. Now, here's one other fact I want to share with you guys before we end this video. Since the collapse, there's only actually been 5 condo sales in the town of Surfside. So when we look at this data and we see 300, well, 295 of those were in the city of Miami Beach, and only 5 of them were in Surfside. So a lot of people might think, oh, well, that's an alarm bell, because obviously Surfside is going to be cursed now. Nobody wants to be in Surfside, but because it's Miami Beach, they might feel differently just because it's not in the same town. Before you jump to that conclusion, let's look at one other data point here that's really important to disprove that. Even though there's only been 5 condo sales closed since the collapse in Surfside as of me making this video, if we look at the time period from January 1st all the way through the end of June in 2020, which was last year before any of this even happened, the town of Surfside only had 33 condo sales total for the first 6 months of the entire year, okay? And when you do the math and you divide that up, 33 divided by 6, you're only getting about 5 closed sales per month on average. So the fact that there's only been 5 closed sales in the last month, that's actually super normal for Surfside. And that's the last thing I wanted to end this video with, is because even myself, I was kind of like really wondering what was going to happen. Is the market going to go up? Is it going to go down? Are people going to be afraid to buy in old buildings now? What's happening? And so far, from what I can see, after only 1 month, it seems like things are pretty normal. We have similar amount of closed sales in Surfside in general. The average price has gone down a bit, but remember, a lot of those sales that we're looking at here, if not almost all of them, are taking place in Miami Beach. So this really doesn't even have anything to do with Surfside. And 2/3 of the sales that are happening are in buildings built before the year 2000. If you enjoyed this video, then I think you'll enjoy this one right over here. Go ahead and check it out, and I'll catch you guys over there in the next one.